Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of Teaching with Tim. And in this episode, we're going to talk about male teachers who are facing limitations in their career choices. And it's it's a serious problem. It's not all in your head, and if someone tells you it's all in your head, they're gaslighting you. It's a serious problem, and I'm going to give you some solutions in this episode. So, one of the most famous instances of this problem being discussed was in an interview with Jordan Peterson. And if you don't know Jordan Peterson, he's a controversial professor. He's worked at Harvard, at um, University of Toronto in psychology. And he was being interviewed by a British journalist named Helen Lewis, and they were talking about discrimination in the workplace. And they talked about the the plights of male teachers, and it was really interesting. So I'm gonna play it for you, and then we can talk about it.
For example, only 15% of them are men, and I interviewed some of them for my book. And you know what? They report exactly the same things that women do in male dominated offices, right? They say, people have conversations that I feel excluded from. I feel stigmatized, like I shouldn't be here. People look at me askance when I say I'm a primary school teacher and I'm a man. You know, they kind of reel back. We all make those implicit associations.
So if it is a structure that's dominated by women, then it's also a tyrannical patriarchy.
I think in that case, then men have a way of, they should be able to complain about the fact that a very female dominated office leaves them feeling out too.
So the journalist here talks a lot about important things like implicit associations. That's kind of a nice way of saying discrimination. Female dominated office. And that's the case of the male teacher, and it can really make him feel lonely. And then we hear some of the things that men teachers have said. They say people have conversations that I feel excluded from. They say I feel stigmatized, like I shouldn't be here. And people look at me askant when I say I'm a male teacher in the primary sector. And those are three really serious things that you don't want to just blow past. So, those three things that we just talked about are basically discrimination. And we can think about discrimination in three ways. There's the loneliness factor, where you are visibly different than everyone around you, and you can't relate to them. You don't understand the conversations that they're having. People look at you with kind of a skeptical lens, and all of those things are really hard to accept and endure. And then beyond like the internal feelings that you might have, there's going to be overt sexism too. Inappropriate comments and behaviors from staff, parents, and students. And this really can get out of hand. So you need to know that it's the potential of inappropriate comments are possible. And then there's also an unfair double standard even among the other teachers and the administration. For example, when male teachers receive promotions, a lot of times their colleagues can assume that the promotion is based on their gender. Whereas when female teachers receive promotions, almost everyone assumes that it's based on merit. And so that double standard can also really widen the divide between you and your colleagues. So let's talk about loneliness. Like feeling excluded from conversations is huge. A lot of people will bond over the female experience, and it's impossible to know what that's like as a man. You can't relate to it, and even if you try to relate to it, that probably won't go well. The other thing is people are sometimes threatened by men. And that's another thing where it's it's almost like the harder you try to correct that, the worse off you get. Because if you come across as accusatory when people are discriminating against you, that's not going to get you anywhere. And you also look completely different. You're visibly lonely. You stand out in the crowd, and that's not easy. Men typically dress very differently than women. They have a different type of body structure. If you're really tall, that can be intimidating. And then if you're like me and you're really short, you could be discriminated for that too. So it's almost like any direction you go, anything you say, you're still going to be isolated. That's what it feels like. And maybe like 10% of that is reflected in reality, but it's real enough that the feelings are valid. And then about the overt sexism is you might experience skepticism about your career choice from parents or colleagues. People might assume falsely about your temperament, your preferences, or personality. Some people, based on their childhood, they might assume that men have a short fuse, that they're easily triggered, that they're quick to raise their voice or get angry. And that's just another reason to be calm, cool, and collected, basically, no matter what happens. And you might notice people avoiding you too because they just don't want to take the risk in interacting with you, and that can really hurt as well. And the double standards, we talked about the financial one, but there's another one too about being perceived as weak for taking time off. So usually when female teachers take time off for sick time or for personal time, or maybe their kids are sick or they have family duties, usually that's not analyzed the way it is heavily analyzed for men teachers. Like when male teachers take time off for sickness, they can be perceived as weak, that they should just power through it. And that double standard, witnessing that double standard can also really hurt. So now let's turn the episode to kind of a more positive direction and talk about solutions. So the solutions that I would encourage you to investigate is to accept that it's not fair. Don't try to be an activist and try to be a revolutionary and reform the system, because although it's difficult to say, people act this way because of human instinct. So it's very human to avoid potential threats. It's very human to judge people on their physical appearance and their presentation. And so if you try to just uproot all that and make it the way you want it to be, you're not going to get anywhere. And the other thing you can do is to, after you've accepted the discrimination, is to build social inroads with your colleagues. Learn how to form really strong connections with them. Be a good person to work with. Make their jobs easier. Because when you make their jobs easier, you make their lives easier, and they will appreciate that. And then be well reasoned in your career choice. So you have to know about yourself, you have to know about why you wanted to get into education. And I'm going to help you do that. So, in terms of accepting discrimination, it's not an easy task. There's a type of therapy that you could work with a psychotherapist. You could ask them about acceptance and commitment therapy. Or you could research it yourself and try your best to work through it. It's basically about accepting the difficult circumstances and then committing to change that can improve the difficult circumstances without trying to 100% resolve them. So some of the changes you can make about not resolving the discrimination but improving your experience of it is to be a good collaborator, be easy to work with, be effective in your work, value your colleagues' opinions. So, some people assume that men cannot be led by women or that they don't value their opinions, and something you could do to counteract this is to, at all opportunities, show deference to a colleague that has more experience than you. Show that you're willing to learn, that you're not someone with this big ego who has to take over the situation. And you could also present well physically, like people do judge based on your physical appearance. You could iron your shirts. You can keep your, if you have facial hair, you can keep it clean, or you can have no facial hair. Just practice good hygiene. That can go a long way and is often overlooked. So those are 3 things that you can commit to changing. And then building social inroads. I sourced some of this advice from a motivational speaker named Sean Stevenson from a Mind Valley conference. It's like a personal development conference. And he talked about using people's names correctly and often. So there's kind of a dopamine hit people hear when they hear their name pronounced correctly and in a positive context. And so you can take advantage of that. You have to be present when you're talking to other people. When you're talking one-on-one to someone, don't be scanning the room to see if there's someone else you want to talk to. Just be present with them. You can invite them to share their perspective, ask their opinion about things. When you ask someone their opinion, that really shows that you care about their internal world, their internal dialogue, and that can go a long way. That's another thing that kind of gives people sort of a dopamine hit, which can help form connections, friendships, and bonds with other people. And then ask meaningful questions. And meaningful questions usually can be summarized with things people want to do, people they want to meet, or places they want to see. Talk about the future, don't talk about the past. Talk about things that people want to do with their lives, their career aspirations, where they want to go on vacation. Those are kind of more exciting questions than to just ask someone to recount something that happened in the past. And then also be an effective collaborator. When you're working on something, if you do your job well, people will remember that and they'll want to work with you in the future. People like you if you make their jobs and their lives easier. You have to be adaptable in conversations. That's another principle. You can't just work with everyone the same way because we all are so diverse, especially in education. In the next episode, we'll talk about some of the diversity within education, but there's diversity. There's some diversity among gender, right? But there's even more diversity around other groups. So be adaptable. You have to understand your own biases and keep them in check. And so you can take an implicit bias check, or most of us probably know what our biases are, even if we're not proud of them. And so then when you're working with someone in that demographic, you need to be extra careful that you're treating them fairly. And then also be genuinely interested in the other perspective. You can't fake that. So you need to really be interested in education to be an effective collaborator. You have to be interested in how other people see things. And then the last solution I'm going to provide to you is to be purposeful in your career. So you need like a short elevator pitch about your interest in education. That way, when people ask you, maybe they come with skepticism, you can calm their nerves, so to speak, by giving them an honest reason about why you're interested in education. And it's even more effective if you connect it to some part of your personality that you can take with a Myers-Briggs test or other personality tests that will give you a lot of important information about who you are and how you see the world. So in conclusion, accept that discrimination against males teachers is real and commit to changes that will help improve that. Develop relationships with your colleagues to become an individual as soon as possible rather than a stereotype. Then you'll just be known as who you are rather than what you are. And third is know yourself and know why you want to work in education. And if you do those three things, you'll be able to handle the discrimination that faces you as a male teacher. Thank you for listening.